put out this note that you set a new world record for the most compassionate act. So if you guys have any compassion for our city, you're going to have to come September or even sooner. But I want to hark back to last year when we did the compassion games, and one of the categories was stories of compassion. And Rita and Gary and others led a competition, and we want to honor those winners of the stories of compassion. So Rita and Gary.
Yeah. Thanks, John. We decided to intentionally do this, and actually, I want to say at the start that we got 30 or more really fine entries, and they were all wonderful. They were all winners, but we wanted to find a way to recognize the good work that came in. So we had a panel of some really good journalists in our community agreed to review the work that was submitted and give some recognition to some of the really fine work, and that's what we've got ready to present today. You heard this morning about if we gathered, Susan led us through the exercise where we gathered in the smaller groups of neighborhood or pet owners or number of siblings that we had, where we all talked about, where we found compassion in those various groups. And what we saw when we had this, request for submissions about stories for compassion, and we saw that we kept it intentionally wide open, and we thought that we found our writers and our submitters and our photographers found compassion in many areas of their lives and in the world around us. And the contest really was wide open. It could come in poetry, it could come in photography, it could come in video, it could come in text. The more the better. We're very multi-platform. And but the key to it was to be intentional in asking for stories of compassion, because the stories that we tell really become the stories that define who we are and what our culture is about. And if we're not intentional about that, too often we get the stories that are about the things that we don't want to define ourselves. Crime, celebrity, scandal. These things exist, but they're not all that exist. And there are not enough avenues to write about and talk about and to share the stories that make this world a compassionate place. Both Gary and I come to this work. We both work at Campanis, which is an organization in Seattle that helps other nonprofit organizations by supplying and finding and supporting staff to organizations in need of that, who aren't able to have the resources themselves to provide it. And Campanis believes in compassionate action through individual reflection and then compassionate support. And interestingly, both Gary and I come to this work from long backgrounds as journalists, so we were kind of a natural fit to make this happen. And then we recruited other friends of ours and former colleagues to become the judges for this contest. So that's how that went down. So I'm just going to let Gary say a few words about. At the beginning of this, we asked Gary to write an op-ed piece that ran in Seattle at Crosscut, and to kind of summarize some of the what we were trying to do with this. I just wanted to give Gary a minute or two to kind of sum up that process.
Thanks. I just wanted, my name is Gary Davis, and I'm the Associate Executive Director of Campanis, and it's my pleasure to be able to work with Rita and with a whole slew of Campanis workers doing great things in the world. But as Rita mentioned, we have journalism backgrounds, and we have watched, both of us have watched the changing landscape of media. It affects everything that we see and that is happening here in our cultural awareness, our current cultural awareness, our political awareness, because there are fewer and fewer professional journalists working and who are on the job today than there were before. It's not all bad. There are some opportunities for some new storytelling. But as you heard today, we have a storytelling culture. And so the stories we do tell are what define us. We need to keep telling stories that matter, because the few journalists that are left working in the agencies that were once very strong are having to do what they can, which means that it's very easy to fall into the rhythm of following the stories of crime, of following the stories of the police blotter or the fire station activity. And what happens is this is what we get. So we are looking out for all kinds of different ways to tell the stories that are happening in our society that are about compassion. And when we talk to some of our friends in the media world, longtime journalists, that, it sounds like do-gooders. You're just do-gooders. You're going to tell all these sweet, sappy stories. Stories of compassion are the range of all stories that matter to what people feel about their community and their neighbors. An investigative journalism story is a story of compassion, because someone did something wrong, and there's a violation, and we need to look at it. So they span the range of stories and the kinds of stories. And one of the things that we really enjoyed in seeing the entries as they came in is we got surprised about the range, about the kinds of stories that came in. And you're going to hear reflected in the award categories a little bit about why we chose to honor the winners in a certain way that we did. Multimedia, different platforms, essays. But what we found is when we asked for our submissions, we got a lot of stories from the people working, as we call them, on the front lines, who are people meeting people where they are and being able to tell their story, especially if those folks can't tell their story or are unable to tell their story. So with that, we have a number of awards and folks here. I'm going to turn it back over to Rita, and I'm going to take pictures.
Thank you. So Gary just mentioned the first responders, people on the front line. We created a category for that. So we had a tie in that category. I'd like Amber Joy and Martha Hoffler to come and get their awards. Amber, this is Amber and Martha. Amber wrote a beautiful piece about, Amber now works at Crowvale, where she's a job coach for people with disabilities, but she wrote about her experience at a homeless shelter and a young man she knew there and worked with, who was a drug addict who had suffered a lot, and Amber just wrote about her experiences working with him, and it was a very moving and touching story. And if you go to our website, or the Compassion Games website, you can find links to all these stories under the Stories of Compassion. And Martha, thank you. Martha is a social worker. She now works at Project Access Northwest, which is an organization that links up people with little or no health insurance to specialty care healthcare providers. And Martha wrote about her experience as a social worker, not at Project Access, but before that time, working with a mother in a family who needed to go into drug and to rehabilitation treatment, and her experience of making that happen. So Martha, thanks a lot. Thank you. The award is for Alana Gunn, who could not come here today, but she sent her daughter, Sarah Lippick, to pick it up. So I'm so glad Sarah could come. Alana wrote a beautiful story called He Lived Compassion at Life's End. And there was a story about a man named Chris Hawkins at the Rose Hedge Multi-Faith Center where Alana works. And the story talked about Chris lived there for 14 years until his death. And the story was about the compassion that was generated around him, by him, and towards him and in the last days of his life. And it was a very moving story, and that's also on the Compassion Games website. So thank you.
Thank you.
And Austin, can you come forward? Austin Williams, who you're going to be hearing a lot more from today. So Austin and What's Good 206 won actually 2 awards. Yeah.
Oh, wait, what was that?
For the stories that he did, that he and his group did. One was on the Kindness School, which is a group in Seattle that, it's a school in Seattle, it's a K-8 school, I believe. It's a private school that centers a lot of its curriculum around kindness, and it's just an amazing place, and they did a wonderful job describing it and telling that story. And that was the Compassionate News Story Award. And his group also won the Compassionate Video Award for a story that I think you referred to this morning about, or John did, about Reggie. That was the homeless man who collected donations to give to the youth shelter. So wonderful job, and thanks very much. And I think that's it. There were several other awards, but these are the people that could come here today. And so just to give you a brief idea of the other kinds of stories that we heard about, we heard from Peace Trees Vietnam about a program that brings veterans of the Vietnam War to Vietnam in reconciliation and peacemaking kinds of activities. The Volunteer Chore Services submitted a beautiful poem about describing the chore workers, the volunteers who provide the chore services as farmers of hope, which was lovely. We had a very personal story from a woman who talked about how her brother, it was actually her father, but how he had reunited his 2 sisters and himself when the family had been separated at a young age by the death of the parents. So those were the kinds of stories that we had, and I think it was a great effort to be included as part of the Compassion Games, and we hope to do that again this coming year. Yes?
I'm wondering if these stories can be on our Compassionate Seattle website, just so they have access.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, we could certainly do that. And we'll find ways to link into as many of you as we can for next year, because we would like to hook up with new organizations to solicit entries and make this a wider and wider contest.
The next contest is coming up.
Yes, Thank you.
I realize that we weren't invited to give speeches even though we're winners. I just would like to counsel you all that you're probably all too busy to spend any time watching any mass media.
Thank you, Amber. All right.
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much for making that happen. Thank you, guys. Awesome. Okay. So, if you look out here, I think Ruben pointed it out, you can see the water. Almost. And that little piece of water is part of our Sailor City. So I mentioned earlier, just a few weeks ago when Doug came along and said, hey, I've been thinking about this for some time, and it really captured our imagination. And I said, you got to come here to Seattle and share with folks about the vision that you have and the idea of it being part of the Coast Salish Nations, putting it forward to the people of British Columbia and Washington. So Doug, are you ready? Got you hooked up here?